Hey guys, this is Aaron Ashman with you, Christian Silver Recording, and welcome to Cardfight Corner. Today we're going to be going over a Bladewing Reiki deck. Now, before I start going over this deck itself, one thing you should know that Bladewing, my personal experience with Bladewings was not the best because I don't remember topping on any tournament ever in my life with these, but however, I've gotten pretty close, and well, yeah, without further ado, let's get to it. So starting off with the starter, there we go, Warfleeter Ordonez. Now, Warfleeter Ordonez is a controversial card because even though his skill is pretty solid, a lot of people prefer not using him. They prefer using the Nightmare Land starter, which basically says that it gets a plus 5k power when she's pulled out of the soul. But the thing with Ordonez is that if you're playing against an aggro deck, and your opponent has one card to choose and retire, this is a very good distractor. Because if, let's say, if you have a card like Doreen on your rear guard at the same time as him, and your opponent can only retire one, then they'll actually have to give it a thought which one's going to be more beneficial towards you. So that's basically the reason I use them. And then going to the triggers, it's very basic. 4 heals, 5 crits, 7 stands, and yeah, that's it. The trigger distribution is a little uneven. However, I felt that this trigger distribution was the best so far and yielded me the best results. But obviously you can use anything you want to. The reason I'm using Sharad triggers is not because of its effect, obviously, because you will need Sharad in order to get her effect off, but it's just because it looks nice. So, moving on to the grade 1s. So, the first one would be the Succubus of Avarice. Now, the Succubus of Avarice is not essential to a Bladewing deck because you have the Quinted Walls, which I'm going to go over later. So, the reason I use her, I only use 1 copy of her in the entire deck. And the reason for that is if, let's say, you go up against a deck with huge chunks of power like Chrono Fang, or decks which get criticals as well, not just power, your Quinted Wall might not always be enough, even with Sullivan's plus 10k support to each of the Guardians. So it's always good to have one if you wanted to, and the best part about her skill is that if she's in the soul, you can put it in your hand anytime. That's pretty nice. So after her, it's 3 of the Quinted Walls, the Bladewing Tirewits. Now, Bladewing Tirewits are very essential, I think, to Bladewing decks in general, because if you're running Sullivan, Tirewit is going to help plenty. I mean, if all of your Guardians get plus 10k, then obviously, even if your Quinted Wall does not reveal many grade 0s or cards with higher shields, you can still give them a plus 10k regardless of what you draw in your checks. So they're pretty good. And the next one would be the Combust Vampire. Now, Combust Vampire, you don't have to run it. I only run 1 copy myself because her skill isn't that great. All it says is that if you rest this unit, you get to Soul Charge 1, and one of your units get plus 5k. Not the greatest skill in the world, of course. And Reiki Soul charges pretty rapidly, so I mean this is pretty slow anyway. So I mean you don't have to use them, but sometimes it comes in handy when you're out of options. Like let's say you don't have anything that soul charges, so this can help sometimes. So the next one would be Killing Dollmaster. I would typically run maybe 1 more of hers. I'll probably replace one of these with her because Killing Dollmaster's skill is just amazing. Essentially just soul charge 3, including herself. So the only drawback is that you have to wait 1 turn because it says at the beginning of your main phase. But other than that, you get to soul charge 3 for each of them. So I mean that Bladewings require a lot of soul charges, as you know, and these can really help. The next one would be a Place It Up Bladewing Rodvis. Now, Rodvis is, without a doubt, I would say, the most important card in the Bladewing deck, because not only does it increase your hand size, it also increases your soul size. And if you include her into the soul, that's a soul charge of 2. So for every Rodbus you have, you get a soul charge 2 and draw the other card. Kind of like the revelation effect, where you get to look at both and you get to pick which one you want to keep in your hand and which one you want to keep in your soul. So I mean, that's why you might want to run a pure Bladewing deck just because of her, but if not, that's okay too. But I think she's very important. The next great one that we should go over is Yellow Bolt. So Yellow Bolt is just a classic. Basically just rest it and you get a soul charge 1. Not very necessary in terms of blade wings, but the good thing about him is that it doesn't have GBs or anything like that, because it's just such an old card in itself. So, you know, by the first turn, even though you don't attack, you can just use the skill and soul charge 1. So the next one we will go over is Doreen the Thruster, which is also a classic. So the amazing thing about Doreen is that there are no costs required at all. Literally, the only thing you have to worry about is soul charging. So let's say you stride onto Bladewing Tybold and you soul charge 5. Doreen gets a plus 15,000 boost. That's a really hefty boost without any cost at all. So even if you don't have any boosters or anything, in a single turn, Doreen can go up to a huge number. So, I mean, it's always good to have her, and she's a classic in herself too. But I only limit myself to run only 2 of hers, because since it's a Bladewing deck, and in order to get her skills off, I try to play more Bladewings than any other cards, but it's good to have her anyways. So we'll be moving on to the last great one we have. That's Eccentric Dissector. Eccentric Dissector is just amazing. At the beginning of your every main phase, just soul charge 1. So every turn that basically lets you soul charge 1, unless your opponent nukes it, which they will usually do. It's also a good distractor, as I said. So he's pretty nice as well. Now, moving on to the grade 2s. The first place of grade 2s would be Bladewing Sykes. Now, Bladewing Sykes, similar to Bladewing Rodbus, is also a pure Bladewing requirement, because if he's in the soul, you put him in the drop zone, you get a soul charge 2, and if you put him in the rear guard, if you place him on the rear guard, and you have Bladewing Vanguard, you get a soul charge 1. And obviously it not only helps boost your soul while it's in your hand and you have a Bladewing Vanguard, but even when he's in the soul, and that's pretty good, because let's say you have 6 cards in the soul, and 4 of them happen to be Bladewing Sykes. You get to soul blast all 4 of them, and you get a soul charge 8. So that's 10 cards in your soul already, and that's a pretty great skill. So moving on, the other grade 2s that I just simply love running is Doppelvampire. Doppelvampire skill, pretty good. If you have 6 or more cards in the soul, it gets plus 5k. If you have 15 or more cards in the soul, it becomes a Silent Tom. I mean, not only is it a Silent Tom, it gets a plus 5k boost just by himself, so you just don't need a back row for him. So let's say if you're going against Kagero and they use Defeat Flare on you, it doesn't matter. You can still attack the Vanguard. Well, unless he gets a trigger, of course. But yeah, I just love using him. And then the next grade 2s, the final grade 2s that we will use, are Blood Sacrifice and Ruthvens. Now, these are not requirements, of course, because his skill is pretty basic. Just drop 1 card, draw 1 card, and you get to soul charge. Now, pretty basic skill, as I've said, really not important, but you can obviously replace him with anything you want. I used to use Tragic Claw, but you know, I just lean towards him more now because I can soul charge, and I don't have to place anything in the same column as him. Now moving on to the powerhouses, the grade 3s of these decks. So the first 2 I'm going to start off with would be Bladewing Sullivans. Now, you don't have to run 2, you can run more, you can run less, it's completely up to you. You can make it completely ragey, or you could add more of him, but Sullivan's skill, to my knowledge, I think is the most competitive grade 3 in a ragey deck, because his defensive abilities are just simply amazing. If you have 15 or more cards in the soul, basically all your all your guardians get a plus 10k shield. So let's say you have that quintet wall, and you, even if you, let's say, have like 5 grade 2s or 5 grade 3s, even each of them will get a plus 10k shield. So that's almost definitely a no pass that I'm going up against any deck. So his defensive skill really helps against modern decks. And the second skill is similar to Reiji's, where if he's placing the Vanguard, choose one of your rear guards and put all of those rear guards into the soul from the deck. Pretty simple, but very useful. So the next grade 3s we're going to go to are the boss, Bladewing Reiji. So Bladewing Reiji is also a classic. When it first came out, like nobody paid much attention to it because everybody thought 15 cards in the soul was almost impossible to get at the time, I guess. But now with these extra support that Bladewings have gotten, his skill isn't hard to pull off at all, and it's a continuous. That's just amazing how it's just a continuous. It just gets a +2 critical. So that's like 3 critical in just 1 attack, and you don't have to pay any cost. That's just amazing. But the only drawback to this is that he's a 10k attacker. So when it first came out, I mean, maybe it could have been used competitively. You can still use it competitively, of course, because you attack for 3 criticals regardless of what. But defensively, it's not the greatest card because it's not only is it just a 10k, it doesn't have much defensive support, unlike Sullivan that gives all of its guardians a +10k shield. But either way, this is basically what will initiate the next grade 3's attack, which would be Wings of Recurrence, Bladewing Reiji, what you would consider the cross right to be of Bladewing Reiji. So basically, if Reiji's attack doesn't hit, counterblast 1, discard 3 cards, and superior ride him as stand. And that's just an awesome card because the cost, you may think discarding 3 cards is a lot, but that's not really the case because with Reiji's attack you get 2 drive checks anyways, so that's 2 cards in your hand, and you just need 1 more card prior to going into your battle phase, and that's not a lot at all. And then if you Soul Blast 15 cards, it gets a +15k and a +1 critical. That's just amazing because +2 criticals. Sorry, that's just amazing because he would be at 3 criticals attacking. Like Reiji, if he had 15 cards in his soul, he'd be at 3 criticals himself. Then cross ride him on top, superior ride him on top, and then Soul Blast 15, and you get another 3 criticals and swing for that with the 26,000 on his own. So I mean, that's just awesome. I mean, that's simply just amazing in terms of Bladewings. And this is the latest support that came out, and it's pretty cheap right now anyway. So if you're thinking about building one, definitely have a couple of those in the deck. So now we'll be moving on to the G zone. So let's go to the G Guardians. I use 1 False Dark Wings, Agrabat Mahlet. The reason I use her is just for the soul charging effect. The shield isn't really that important. I just use her initially, and then after that I just use Nighttime Gentleman because all of your units get resist. So let's say if you're playing against Aquaforce or things like that, or Shadows or Kagero, your opponent cannot retire after you guarded with him. So yeah, that's basically the G Guard lineup. After them, I use 3 Bladewing Tide Bolts. Now, this is basically the engine that runs a great Bladewing deck because Bladewings soul charge so fast that you're likely to deck out very quickly. So what he does is he just puts the entire drop zone that you have back into your deck and soul charge 5. And if you already have 15 cards in the soul, your front row gets a +10k. Pretty amazing skill. So I think it's still a little expensive on TCG. I think it's like $9 or something, but it's definitely worth it because his skill you can use late game, early game, mid game, anytime. It's basically all pro bono. Then the next grade 4 lineup would be the Mask of Demonic Frenzy Air Sirius. I just run 3 of him because, well, I just don't have anything better to run at the moment, but sometimes he can be useful because his Darkness ability activates. He becomes an Ammon if you have 15 or more cards in the soul, and you get a soul charge 2 right after the Darkness ability activates. And when the attack hits, choose one of your opponent's rear guards. Your opponent chooses one of his rear guards and retires. On to the next one. It's One Stepped in Sin Sherrod. So run 2 copies of him just in case, because Sherrod, which came out very recently, not the most recent card, however, it did come out in the previous set. So basically, nukes the entire field, gets plus 10k, and your opponent cannot perfect guard it or use a Quinted Wall against you. I mean, pretty awesome card, of course, but the best part is that it nukes the entire field of your opponent. I mean, it kind of nukes your own field as well, but that's sort of like a finisher. Not necessarily, it's not totally a finisher. There are other finishers in this deck, but Shard can definitely be used as one. So let's say you're going up against Aquaforce, and they have a hefty lineup of rear guards. Just use them early game, and boom, you can slow them down plenty. Because they depend a lot on numerous attacks, so they need numerous rear guards. So you can slow them down a lot. And finally, well, actually, we have 2 more cards to get through. So, Great Demon, Soulless Demagogue. Demagogue is kind of like a late game thing. It's definitely not an early game thing, because during your turn, all the units in your front row get plus 1k for each card that's put into your soul. So basically a Doreen, but for your front row. So if you have a lot of soul charging cards in your hand, you can use them early game as well if you wanted to. I mean, sort of a late game card, but I don't usually use them anyways. And last but not the least, Abominable One, Gilles de Reis. So, Gilles de Reis, you can run a playset of him if you wanted to, but I just don't think running a playset of him is necessary, because I mean, his skill is clearly amazing. 15 cards in the soul, your opponent cannot perfect guard it. A number of face-up cards in your G's and his 2 or more gets plus 1 critical. And if the number of cards in your soul is 10 or more, it gets plus 10k. So, basically, does not allow your opponent to perfect guard either, and it attacks with 2 crits, which is like the only Dark Irregular card that attacks with more than 1 critical. And doesn't let your opponent perfect guarded. So, I mean, pretty awesome skill. You can definitely run a playset of him if you really wanted to, but I just don't ever get the opportunity to use him twice. Usually I use him as a finisher, or if that doesn't work, I use Shara to end the entire game. But as I've said, you can definitely play more of him. So guys, that's it for our video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was beneficial to you, and if you liked our video, don't forget to put that thumbs up and subscribe for our other videos. Thank you.